welcome to another trowel talk video. I thought we could talk about trowels today, plastering trowels. There's loads of trowels on the market at the moment. I thought I'd share with you the trowels that I use, which trowels do what, where to use them, where not to use them, and so on. So I think by now most of us are all aware that the most popular all-rounder for any plasterer worth his salt is the Marshalltown. The Marshalltown's the winner in terms of reliability and consistency, I think. They've been around a hell of a long time. I believe since the 1930s, maybe even before. Of course, Marshalltown isn't the only leading brand around, especially nowadays when it comes to trowels. So we've got brands like Neela, Riffina, Tyzak, Ragni, all producing good trowels where you're able to get a decent finish with them. But I think Marshalltown is probably the most well-known plasterer's trowel. If you were to say, ask somebody what's the decent plasterer's trowel, Marshalltown would be the name that probably gets thrown around the most, I would guess. So out of all the trowels that I own, the Marshalltown is the trowel that sees the most mileage. Now, having said that, I do have a few of the trowels in the arsenal that are well used and do come out most days, so we'll talk about that in this video. Okay, so what's in my bag? What do I take to work with me on a daily basis if I'm off to do some plastering work? Well, I've got an old, what I call a roughing trowel, which is an old, I think it's a shore graft. It's a little 10-inch or 11-inch stumpy trowel that I use for all my dabbing and all my roughing on. So if I'm filling chasers with bonding coat, or if I'm applying hardwall, sand and cement even, general prep as well. So if I'm scraping back, I use this trowel, and it's just an old knackered old trowel that we keep in the bag, and that is used as a prep trowel. It's not used for applying and finishing plaster or even backing plaster. It's just a roughing trowel. Next is, I've already mentioned, the Marshalltown. The 13-inch Marshalltown is the best all-rounder in my opinion. We still use it. I've also got a 16-inch Riffina trowel, which is a thicker gauge of steel. It's rigid, it's quite a rigid trowel, so there's not as much flex on it as the Marshalltown, but brilliant trowel for flatness and sharp internal angles. Sometimes with the Marshalltown, the perma shape, now and again, it can sometimes create a slight lip toward the ceiling line where the corners meet, because it's quite flexible, so that when you push down and compress, you can get a slight bow curve on it, which probably goes unnoticed. I mean, I've never had any work picked up for it, but it's just something I've noticed myself, being fussy. Compared to the Riffina rigid trowel, you don't get any of that. So I like to use the Riffina where I can. Sometimes I'll use it to lay on, like on this job. You might see that I've got the blue handled 16-inch Riffina. I sometimes use it to lay on, but doing that day in and day out with a 16-inch trowel can take it out on the wrist. So most of the time I will use my 14-inch Marshalltown trowel to lay on from start to finish. I have got a 20-inch ox. Sorry, not 20-inch, 18-inch ox trowel, which is quite lightweight considering it's 18 inches. Again, great all-rounder. Oh yeah chaps, just while I've got a minute between sets, I just want to talk to you through these trowels. So at the minute, I'm using this Riffina or Riffina, or whatever you want to call it. I'm laying on with that, as opposed to my normal Marshalltown 14 inch. I'm using this 16 inch Riffina. I like to use this one because it's a thicker gauge steel, so it's a bit more rigid. So when you running your corners in your internals, you get a good compression and you get a nice clean internal angle. Sometimes when you're using the MTs, you can get a bit of a lip in the corners, so I always try and use the rigid trowel when I'm closing in. I've also got the ox, what we use sometimes, that's 18 inch. Don't use it very often because it's a bit clumsy. So worth investing in one of these Riffina 18 inch trowels. Bit heavy on the wrist if you're using them every day. But again, just switch it up a bit. You don't always need to use your Marshalltown, although it's a good start to finish trowel. Worth investing in one of these bigger trowels. Another thing worth mentioning is always have a roughing trowel. Always have a little old trowel that you use for dabbing, filling chases, bonding out bits, scraping back your walls, taking off loose stuff like this tile adhesive. Always have an old, crappy old trowel that you use for your prep and your dabbing and your bonding out. Don't use your, never use your finished trowel for rough work, just in case you were to nick it with a nail or anything like that, or drop it, or dink it. You keep this for your finishing, Marshalltown. Use your old rubbish stumpy trowel, cheap one, for your prep. To get up here yesterday, look. Some Spider-Man action. Okay guys, let's talk about the bigger trowels again, the 16, the 18 inches. Why bother using, I mean obviously you use them because you're covering a bigger surface area, so yeah, so you know, obviously troweling up with an 18 inch trowel compared to an 11 inch trowel is going to be a lot quicker. In terms of laying on gear, I think anything above a 16 for me personally is just too clumsy, but flattening, brilliant, use the big ones. Another perk of the longer trowel is if you've got nibs like columns or wide reveals, things like that, they're great for bead to bead work. So if you've got a margin between beads of 15, 16, 17, 18 inches, and you need to fill that and have it nice and plumb and square, these trowels are ideal for plastering columns, and also for filling up your chases, for bonding in your chases if a wall's been removed, or a small brick section, or if the sparky's put in an extra wide chase. If you've got a nice 18 inch trowel, you can swipe that up and down, no problems, and you've completely backfilled it, and it's just a lot easier sometimes to have a bigger trowel in your arsenal than solely just to rely on your Marshalltown. I mean, we have our straight edges, for real wide areas that need to be bonded up or hard-walled, but we use our straight edges for that sort of thing. Also, I've got a couple of shorter rules that we use. I think they're about 1 metre wide or 900, something like that. So we use those things like if you had a chimney breast knocked out and you need to make good, we tend to use those. One of them's serrated which sometimes it comes in handy. So for the real wide areas that need backfilling, we use the straight edges and the rules, but the long 16 or 18 inch plastering trowels is sort of a medium between the two. So again, wide chasers from the Sparkies, columns that need skimming up bead to bead. If you've got a distance that's longer than your 14 inch or 13 inch MT, then the 16 inch trowel or the 18 inch trowel, finishing trowel, comes in really good, really handy, even if you just lay on both coats. And then after your first couple of trowel ups, if you're finding it clumsy, you could switch back to your 13 inch Marshalltown, but it just backfills those areas for you, gets them nice and flat, so you're not having to go over your work. So that's where the long trowels come into play, and they are a good piece of kit to have in your arsenal. So I'd advise anyone starting out, bag yourself a 16 inch or an 18 inch trowel just to chuck in the arsenal. The Riffinas are reliable, decent bits of kit. Another trowel that's in the tool bag, is the Ragney corner trowel, or the Twitcher. It's nickname, or I think the Americans call them birds. We call them Twitchers. I've had a few corner trowels over the years. The Marshalltown was decent, it was okay. We used to clip the corners off it and use a concrete block or a disc and just round them off, but Ragney, they've done the rounded corners, which is, I think that's why it's such a big hit with plasterers. It seems to be the best seller, the best all-rounder. It's got the double rounded corners, top and bottom, so it stops it snagging when you're running in the corners, stops it catching. So what's left in the bag now? So we've got, obviously there's a few small tools, the margin trowels. You pick them up off eBay, relatively cheap. So you'll have a number of margin trowels starting off around 1/2 inch and go right up to 50mm, 60mm, 70mm for those areas, the corners, round doors, underneath pipes, small margins you can't get to with your trowel. So you need a set of those. And last but not least is the Flexi, the old Flexis. Like Marmite, these things. Some plasterers love them to bits, others I think they're crap. But we pull them out on the last trowel up, on the shine up. We don't use them to lay on. We don't use them to trowel up, so they stay in the bag until the end of the job. On the last pass, we give them good going over, and they do work. They shine up the plaster nice, but apart from that, they don't do a lot else, in all honesty, not in my experience. They're great for, having said that, they're great for if you've got a barreled ceiling or curves. Once you've reached the stage where you're on your wet trowel, if you've got a curved section, they are good for that. So they serve a purpose, but mainly these Flexis, they're just money shot trowels. They're just for the shine up. So I'm not writing them off for sale. We use them a lot. You see I'm using it here just to shine that lid up. But be careful where you use these. They're really popular at the minute. A lot of the younger spreads are using these Flexi trowels, and I know that some guys do lay on with them. In my experience, laying down and trying to flatten with these things, there's not enough compression there. They're too flexible, in my experience. So I stick with the Marshalltown and the Riffina rigid trowel right through to the end, and then just before we tidy up, we give it a lick with this. This is the Superflex Ii. It's lasted well. It's riveted and it has tape. I think the originals were just literally just taped on. The blade, I mean. And they got a bit of a rough deal because they were falling apart after a couple of months. This one's over a year old and it's still going strong. Matt's got one too, his is in good nick. Mine's in worse condition than his because as soon as you drop these things or a slight kick or you know they fall in the van, the back of the van, they are knackered. They're rendered useless really because the steel's that thin. It means they're very fragile, so if you have got a wallet or a trowel box, you want to chuck these in just to protect them because they are very fragile. Nice comfy handles on them, nice cork handle. They are a bit of a pig to clean with the tape being on the back of the blade. The plastic can build up pretty quick. Yeah, they tend to stay relatively clean to be fair because you're not laying on with them. So to summarise then, we've got the 13-inch Marshalltown, the start to finish trowel. That's the trowel that's going to see the most mileage. You use that day in and day out to lay on, close and finish all of your plastering. The bigger trowels come into play when needed, and sometimes handy if you've got loads of flat board and you want to flatten off quickly, you can use the bigger trowels. We've got the old roughing trowel that we use. As I say, it's used for prep work, dabbing, bonding, prepping your walls, scraping up. It can take a pummeling without you worrying about the blade becoming damaged because you don't finish with this trowel. It's just a roughing trowel. We've got the Ragney corner trowel for all your internal corners. That's a must for any plasterer. And finally, you've got your flexi trowel, your flexible blade for polishing up at the end. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Don't forget to join Trowel Talk on Facebook. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.